Hello everybody, welcome back to American Textbook Reading. My name is Brian Stuart, and in this lesson we're looking at Science Book 4, Lesson 14. And the title of the lesson is Sources of Heat. I hope you're warm. If you are warm, how are you warm? Where is your heat coming from? Is it coming from the sun? Is it coming from the heater in your house? Interesting. Question. In this lesson, we will be taking a look at two main ideas. One idea is how heat is created, and the second idea is how heat moves. Okay, let's begin. The first word in the vocabulary section is natural gas. Natural gas is a gas which is burned for energy. Natural gas is an interesting word. I mean, we know what gas is. Gas is what you put in your car, right, to make your car run. But what's natural gas? Isn't all gas natural? No, it's not, because the gas that you put in your car really isn't natural. It is taken from oil, run through a factory that produces gas that you put in your car. However, deep underground, there are pockets of gas. And when we talk about gas, I'm not talking about the liquid gas that you put in your car. I'm talking about a gas like air. It's like air. And it's trapped underground and it burns because of the chemical composition. It can burn very quickly. In fact, it's kind of dangerous because it can explode. And you probably have natural gas in your home. When you turn on your stove, right, you can smell, actually that smell is added to it, but you can smell the gas coming from your stove, and then you click on it, and then it makes a flame, and your mom or your dad cooks food on the stove. Don't play with your stove. Of course, I don't mean to encourage that, but that's an example of natural gas in your home, and sometimes we have to be careful about that because it can be dangerous. So don't play with that, but that's an example of natural gas, and it burns very easily. Okay. Next is the stove. I just explained about natural gas. You see the fire here? It's a blue flame. What's burning? That is the natural gas I was just talking about. And of course, it's on your stove. Stove is a device that makes heat for cooking. Now, many stoves are natural gas stoves. You could also have electric stoves that just use an electric coil to make heat, but most stoves will use natural gas. My wife likes to cook with natural gas. She likes it better than electric, and it's quicker, and it's much more efficient. But yeah, many homes will have natural gas stoves for cooking. It's a very easy way to cook something in your kitchen. Light bulb. Light bulb is a different type of device. Of course, it doesn't use natural gas. It uses electricity to make light. And it also makes heat, right? So be careful. If the light bulb has been on for a while, don't touch it. It's hot. Of course, new modern light bulbs stay cool, but the older light bulbs, they get hot. So they make light. They can also make heat, but that is a light bulb. By the way, bulb is what you call this, especially this shape, right? That is a bulb. And of course, because it makes light, it is a light bulb. Next, we have conductor. Conductor, now you could use conductor means different things for different situations. If you go to see a concert, you see a man or a woman standing in front of all the people playing their instruments, and they're waving their hands like this. That is a conductor. That's a different kind of conductor. The conductor here is a substance, a material that allows electricity or heat to travel through it easily. So if you look at these, what's the picture of? The picture is of a bunch of pots and pans, right? Those are pans. Pans are shallow. They're on the bottom. The pots are deep. They're on the top. So pots and pans, they're made out of metal. Why? Because metal is a substance that allows electricity or heat, in this case heat, to travel through it quickly. So if you put a metal pot onto your stove, the heat from the natural gas will pass through the metal, to the food and it will cook quickly. If you used a different material other than metal, the heat maybe wouldn't pass through and your food would stay cold, or the material would burn, depending on the material, right? But metal is a good conductor. It allows heat and electricity to pass through it very easily. Copper is a good conductor of electricity. So in the wires in your home, they're made of copper. We talked about this in a previous lesson because electricity can pass through copper very easily. Okay, so a substance that allows heat or electricity to pass through it is a conductor. Okay, and like I said, you can talk about different conductors, like the person in front of a band or the person who drives a train. They're a conductor, person who checks your tickets on the train. But in this case, we're talking about a substance that allows heat or electricity to pass through it quickly. That is a conductor. Next, we have friction. We talked about friction in a previous lesson when we were talking about forces moving across different types of surfaces. Of course, friction is the force that occurs when you rub one object against another. And when you have friction, right, you're losing energy. But actually, when you lose energy, the energy is getting transferred from one object to another. And when that energy gets transferred, what happens? Rub your hands together. What do you feel? You feel, oh, it's getting hot, right? So that energy is being transferred between your hands. You're actually creating some energy there because of the friction, and you're heating up your hands. And that's why when it's cold outside, right? And especially if somebody doesn't have any gloves on, they'll rub their hands together to make them warm. Okay, so of course wear gloves if it's a cold day, but if you don't, you can rub your hands together to make them warm. Next, we have ice cube. This is like the opposite of rubbing your hands together, is holding a bunch of ice in your hands. Now, ice cube is a small block of ice. A cube is like a little box, right? I'm not a very good artist, but let me draw very quickly. This is a, oops, see, I'm not a very good artist. That's a cube, right? And of course, when you make ice, you usually pour water into a piece of plastic or metal that makes the water freeze in these small shapes. We call those ice cubes, so that you can easily put them into your drink. So you can have nice cold iced tea, for example, or just ice water. You put it into a drink to make it cold, because iced tea is not very good when it's warm. I mean, that's a different kind of tea. That's warm tea. That's not iced tea. So if you want to enjoy cold iced tea or lemonade or just water on a hot summer day, put some ice in it. It makes it cold and it's very refreshing. That's an ice cube. But don't hold ice like that when it's winter or cold outside. That's not a good idea. Okay in the summertime, not in the winter. Okay, so those are our words for the vocabulary section. Let's talk about the first main idea of this lesson, and that is how heat is created. And we've already talked about a couple of different ways during the vocabulary section. For example, the first picture here, we saw that when we were talking about friction. By rubbing two things together, you can create heat. By the way, this is how people a long time ago used to make fire, right? They would rub a small piece of hard wood, a stick, against another piece of wood, and they put little like shavings or maybe hair down below so that that heat would turn into fire and it would catch those things on fire very quickly. That's how they made fire a long time ago. They had rubbed two sticks together very quickly, and that friction created heat. And if it's hot enough, and if you had something that caught fire very easily, you can make a fire that way. So that's one way, by rubbing two things together, whether it's your hands or two pieces of wood. Interesting. Another way that heat is created, of course, is by the sun. Everybody knows that. If you're cold, if you feel a little cold on a spring or a fall day and it's a sunny day, just go out in the sun, sit in the sun for a while, and you will warm up. Another way that you create heat is by using electricity. Remember, I said be careful, don't touch the light bulb if the light has been on for a while because it's hot. You might hurt your fingers. Modern light bulbs are not so hot, but the old-fashioned ones, yeah, they get hot because, and of course you have electric stoves. Those can also create heat. And finally, when we talked about natural gas, right, here, natural gas, if you burn it, you create heat. Of course, you can also burn oil and you can also burn wood, right? I talked about that in the friction, rubbing two pieces of stick together, then you start to burn wood and you create heat. So there's a lot of different sources for heat, how heat is created. The second idea is how heat moves. So you create heat, but how do you move that heat from one source to another? And there's many reasons why you would do that, of course, for cooking, for staying warm, for doing different things. So first of all, remember, we need a couple of things for moving heat. First of all, we need a conductor. We talked about conductor in the vocabulary section. A conductor is a material which allows heat or electricity to pass through it very quickly. Now, we didn't see in the vocabulary the opposite of conductor. What is the opposite of a conductor? That is an insulator. Insulator. Insulate, that's a verb. Insulate means to protect something, right? To keep it away from another thing. So an insulator is something that does not conduct heat or electricity well. For example, wood. Wood does not conduct heat very well. If you put hot soup into a wooden bowl, especially if the wood is thick, you can touch the outside of the bowl and no problem, it won't be hot. The soup inside the bowl may be very, very hot. You have to be careful eating it because it's too hot. You have to cool it down. But you can hold that bowl, no problem, because it's made of wood and the heat does not pass through the wood very easily. Wood is an insulator. Plastic is also another insulator. Of course, you should have thick, heavy plastic if you put something hot into the plastic bowl, but plastic does not conduct heat or electricity very well. Of course, it will burn if it gets too hot, but it does not conduct that energy very well. So, as we saw before, metal is a good conductor. Conductor is a material that heat moves through easily. We talked about that. An insulator, the opposite of a conductor, is a material that heat does not move through easily. Some materials such as wood, plastic, wool, and fur are insulators. Fur is a good example, right? Your pet cat or dog has a lot of fur on their body because they want to keep warm when it's cold. Fur helps insulate your pet from cold temperatures. And a lot of animals have fur to protect themselves from cold temperatures, especially in the winter. Okay, so we have conductors, energy moves through those easily, and we have insulators. Energy does not move through them easily. Okay, good. Okay, let's take a look at the reading passage now. As usually, I will read it out loud. Please practice along with me. Repeat after me out loud or in your mind. Focus on the vocabulary items and any new words that we run across. Let's begin. Heat is energy. Heat comes from many sources. Heat moves from warmer areas to cooler areas. If you rub your hands together, they get warm because of friction. Friction is a source of heat. Light from the sun is energy. It heats things and makes them warm. A light bulb uses electricity to create light. Heat is also created. When natural gas burns, heat is created. We use natural gas to heat things like water. Heat can change matter. If you heat an ice cube, it will melt. It goes from being a solid to a liquid. Heat can cook food. We cook food in a metal pot on a stove. Metals are good conductors of heat. Heat moves from the stove to the food easily. Plastic is not a good conductor of heat. That is why most pots have a plastic handle. Okay, that's the reading section. And of course, that's a good point, right? Most pots have a plastic handle because if it was a metal handle, a metal conducts heat very easily. So if you grab that metal handle, ouch, that'd be hot. But if you wrap that handle in plastic, then it protects your hand because the heat doesn't go through the plastic very well. That's a good use of plastic as an insulator. Okay, good. Okay, so how is the information in this reading passage organized? Here we have the skill classify. Classify means to put things into certain categories or groups, to classify them. So in this case, we have a topic sentence, right? A general sentence that says, heat comes from many sources. And that's a very typical topic sentence for a passage, a reading passage that uses classify, because many sources. Well, let's classify those sources. Let's put those different sources into different groups. That's classification. So heat comes from many sources. What is the first source? Or the first classification? We have friction. That is one of the sources of heat. So friction. When you beep your hands together, they get warm. What do? We talked about this, especially in the wintertime, right? You want to make your hands warm? Well, you rub your hands together. When you rub your hands together, they get warm. So rub means to, push one object against another object, back and forth to make friction, to make heat, to make warmth. The next source for heat is sunlight, right? Sunlight, what does sunlight do? If you put something out in the sun, what happens to it? It gets hot, right? So sunlight, it heats things. It heats things. And of course makes them warm. If you heat something, of course, it's the same thing as saying it makes it warm. So you can heat things and make them warm. By the way, I talked about iced tea before. That's a good way to make iced tea, right? You have water in a glass jar. You put some tea bags into the jar, put the cap on, put it out in the sun. After a few hours, the heat of the sun will make the tea in the tea bags go through all the water because it gets hot. And so the tea spreads out through the water. Okay, and then you put a little sugar in it, and then you got iced tea. Very good. Good for the summertime. Okay, and put some ice cubes in it, right? Okay, after that, because you don't want to drink hot iced tea. Ugh. Okay, anyway, not on a hot summer day. Anyway, okay, the last source is natural gas. And we talked about that. There are pockets of, I'm going to talk about pockets, but big pockets, large areas underground that have natural gas. They are a little bit dangerous, right? But the gas can come up to the ground, especially if you drill down to it, and companies will tap into that natural gas and they'll get it. So natural gas does what? How do you get the heat from the natural gas, right? If the gas just escapes, right, there's no heat. It just comes out in the air and it kind of dissolves into the air. But if you put fire to it, right, it will burn. So natural gas, it burns and heat is created. Now, of course, natural gas burns very quickly and very easily. And of course, you might have it in your home and your stove. Don't play with natural gas. It's very dangerous. But it burns very quickly. Heat is created, and we use it for cooking all the time on our stoves in our kitchens. Okay, so those are three different sources of heat. Of course, there's many other sources of heat, but in the reading passage, we were talking about three main sources of heat. So this is classify. Heat comes from many sources. What are three of those sources? Boom, boom, boom. Friction, sunlight, natural gas. Of course, there are other sources as well, but these are the three mentioned in the reading passage. Okay, so that's our lesson for today. We're taking a scientific look at how heat is created and also how heat moves using conductors or insulators to protect against too much heat or too much electricity. Okay, so that's our lesson for today. Thanks for studying with me. I hope to see you in the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.